بسم الله والحمد لله وكفى والصلاة والسلام على المصطفى وأصلي وأسلم على آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين وعلى أصحابه بجهدهم قام هذا الدين رضي الله عنهم أجمعين ثم ما بعد. The theme of this short reflection is entitled The Principle of Movement in Islam. This theme is derived from the text composed by Allama Muhammad Iqbal, rahimahullah. He says in his text, or actually he poses a question, and that question is, what then is the principle of movement in the nature of Islam? Iqbal wants to know, why is it that European civilization has been so dynamic scientifically and in asserting itself onto the world? He asks a question. He says, what is the principle of movement in Islam? So Iqbal then, as an intellectual, wants to return back to a basis. He wants to find something within the sources of Islam which will account for Islam as a dynamic cultural force in reality. Iqbal then, as an intellectual, wants to understand Islam within the light of a civilization as a cultural force which produces cultural artifacts and which brings solutions to the problems of humanity. So then he says, what then is the principle of movement in the nature of Islam? He answers it. This is known as Ijtihad. So the answer to his question is that the principle of movement in Islam is Ijtihad. So now he goes to define the term Ijtihad. He defines it literally now. He says the word literally means to exert, meaning literally in the language, the Arabic language. Then he shifts. He says in the terminology of Islamic law, it means to exert oneself, or it means to exert with a view to form an independent judgment on a legal question. So here, Ijtihad then takes on a specific meaning within the context of Islamic law or legalese or legal terminology. Within the context of the sciences of fiqh, within usul al-fiqh, it takes on a specialized meaning. But in the Arabic language, it means to exert. This is what he is telling us. Then he says, the idea, I believe, has its origin in a well-known verse of the Quran, and to those who exert, we show our path. So Iqbal then brings to the table a very interesting concept. That is a concept which will help us understand Ijtihad beyond the debates of whether one should engage in Ijtihad or whether one should follow taqlid as a notion. Whether one should be a muqallid or a mujtahid. No, Iqbal is not concerned with this. Iqbal is concerned with the notion of Ijtihad as a force that's dynamic, that it motivates to action, and that what is born from it is a cultural force which produces cultural artifacts which serve humanity. So Iqbal's vision then is one which moves beyond the confines of being an expert in fiqh. Iqbal wants you to be an expert in medicine. Iqbal wants for you to be an expert in mechanics, in engineering, in carpentry, in whatever field that you're in, as a housewife, in whatever field that you're in. Iqbal then teaches us that the reality of Ijtihad is to exert oneself to the point of excellence. But that excellence must be predicated upon principles of development. Principles of development so that our intellect is developed, so that our heart is developed, so that our physical self is developed. This is the reality that Islam is calling us to develop ourselves and then to serve humanity, to give something back to humanity. Remember that Iqbal is understanding the concept of Ijtihad as a notion to be understood in the face of a civilization which has dawned and a civilization which has decreased. Western civilization has arisen and Islamic civilization has decreased. So Iqbal is concerned then with that principle of movement which would move the Muslim to be a contributor to history.